Hello, how are you? I've got a story for you today. And this strange story is called The Princess and the Prisoner. This is the story, and it's all about a princess and a prisoner. Now this prisoner, he was a young man. He was only 18, but he was a prisoner in the king's dungeons because what had happened was the king was going to have a party. He was going to have his 50th birthday party, and it was going to be a really big party. But the king sometimes got headaches. Oh, my head, it aches. Oh, and he'd go like this. Oh, I got a headache. And today he had a headache, even though it was the day of his party. So he was a bit upset, but he was going to go and lie down in bed. So he went upstairs and laid down in bed, and his plan was that he would lie in bed and rest, and then before the party he'd take a headache pill, and then he'd eat the headache pill, and he would just be fine, and then he wouldn't worry because there was going to be music and everything. Anyway, the prisoner, even though at this time he wasn't a prisoner, he was a boy. He was 18, and he was going to play the drums in the band that were going to play music at the palace party. So he was walking from his van through the courtyard, through the big halls of the castle. But all of a sudden, he sneezed. And he dropped his drums. Crash, bang, smash, bang. Oh, it was a terrible noise. And the king, all the way upstairs on the 4th floor in his bedroom, heard the noise. And he went, whoa! Who's made all that noise? And he was really angry. And he ran down the stairs and he grabbed the 18-year-old boy and said, "You're a bad boy. Why are you making all that noise?" And he said, I'm sorry, king. I dropped my drums and the drums fell and the cymbals crashed and everything fell. I'm really sorry. I didn't mean to wake you up, king. I don't care if you meant it or not. Dungeon. And the king said, dungeon. And the soldiers came, grabbed the boy, and they took him down into the dungeon and locked the door. And the king said, throw away the key. But they didn't throw away the key because that would have been nasty, because then they couldn't give him food. So they said, no, we'll keep the key in a safe place, sir. Don't worry. And the king said, okay. I don't want to hear anything from him. He's bad. He gave me a headache. He made my headache even worse than it was before. So the poor prisoner was stuck in the prison. It was all dark. There was only one tiny window about this big with a little bit of light. Oh. Anyway, the king had his party, and then the life went on in the castle, and everyone sort of forgot about the prisoner. But sometimes the king, he had to go round the countryside saying hello to all the villages and speaking to people and see if they had any problems about the kingdom and if there was anything he could do to help them. So one day he was doing his travelling like this all around the country, and all of a sudden he was out, and the princess, the king's daughter, she was playing in the garden. Now she was playing in the garden like this. She was playing with the ball, and the prisoner could see her through this little window. Oh, she's so beautiful, the fair princess. Oh, and he knew she was the king's daughter, so he knew he'd never ever be able to talk to her or anything. But do you know what used to happen? While the king was doing his travelling around the country, the guards felt a bit sorry for the prisoner because they knew it was not really fair, because he'd only just dropped some drums and then he was in the prisons forever and ever. So what they used to do is they used to let him out when the king wasn't there, and they'd let him come into the courtyard and let him walk around a bit, and they'd play football with him a bit, and sometimes they'd play a game of cards and things like that. And then when they knew the king was coming back, they'd put him back in his prison cell. They weren't meant to do that, but sometimes when the king's away, you can sort of do extra things that you're not really allowed to do if the king's there. It's a bit naughty, but it was okay because the prisoner had a nicer life. But one day, the prisoner was in the courtyard playing football, and the princess was walking by on a balcony, and she looked out of the window. She saw the prisoner. Ooh, she thought, I quite like him. He's quite handsome. He looks strong and rugged. Even though he'd been in the prison, he still looked strong because they had an exercise bike and they had exercise machines in the dungeon, which he wasn't meant to use, but he used them sometimes very quietly. Anyway, so the prince, I quite like him. And then the next time the king went travelling, so about 3 months later, the king was travelling again, the princess deliberately went down and looked at him, and then she told one of the soldiers, bring that man to me, bring him to me. And the soldiers, no, that he's meant to be in his prison cell, he's not allowed to talk to you. But the princess said, yes, I want to talk to him, bring him here. So they talked together, and they got on really well. And the princess thought, oh, I really like him. And the prisoner thought, oh, she's so lovely. And they began to fall in love. But it was really difficult because then that evening the king came back and the princess had to pretend she didn't even know there was a prisoner. And the prisoner had to stay in the prison cell. But every day the princess would make a little note saying, I miss you, I hope you're well, I'm looking forward to the king going away again. And she would pass that note to her maid, who would go and give it to the prison guard. The prison guard would give it to the prisoner. And then 3 months later, when the king was travelling again, they opened the door and they were together. They were walking around holding hands. And everyone in the castle knew that this was happening, except the king. But one day, the king came back early. And he walked through the doors because he had a headache, so he had to stop his travelling. So he had a headache and he came back. He was so angry. He walked through the doors to the palace and he saw the princess holding hands with the prisoner. What are you doing? Execute him, chop his head off. I don't want him being my... So they put the prisoner back in the cell, and the next day they were going to chop his head off. But the princess was in love. She said, no, father, I love him. He's my lovely, lovely, lovely. Please, I want to marry him. No. The next day the sun was going to come up and they were going to chop the prisoner's head off. But the princess was really sad. She was crying all night, and the king said, I don't care. He gave me a headache and I don't want you talking to him unless I say it's okay. So they got all the things ready to chop the prisoner's head off. But the princess, she snuck down in the middle of the night and the guard was asleep. And she took the key from the guard and she opened the door and she let the prisoner out, and they went away and they found 2 horses and a little cart, and they rode very quietly out of the palace, and they rode all the way to the other side of the kingdom. And in this cart they had £54,000. So they had enough to buy a little house and a little bit of land, and their plan was that they were going to do some farming and live happily ever after. But then in the morning, at the palace, the king woke up and he was excited because he didn't like the prisoner. He wanted to see the prisoner's head be chopped off. So he woke up and, right, I'm feeling good today. Let's go and get the prisoner's head chopped off. He went downstairs and he saw that his princess, his daughter, was gone. And then he went down to the dungeons and he saw the prisoner was gone as well. And he knew what had happened. He knew they had escaped. They had eloped together. That's what it's called. They run away together because they love each other. It's called eloping. They had eloped. So immediately he sent his 400 soldiers out. Scour the kingdom, find them. I want them both having their head chopped off. So all the soldiers went all over the kingdom looking for the princess and looking for the prisoner. But they couldn't find them because the local villagers had told the princess what was happening, that there were soldiers coming. So the princess and the prisoner had got onto their 2 horses with their little cart and they'd gone to the next country. They'd gone to Switzerland. And in Switzerland they're really good at playing tennis. And the princess liked tennis, so she was in Switzerland and she was going to stay with a friend of hers who was a princess in Switzerland. And the king sent his soldiers all around his country, but they couldn't find it. And after 3 days, he still couldn't find the princess. And he still couldn't find the prisoner. And then he started to change his ideas, because then he was really scared. He was saying, what's happened? Where is she? Oh, I just want her back now. I'm worried. I want my little daughter, my lovely princess back. Where is she? Where is she? So he was getting really, really worried. But the princess was just playing tennis with the prisoner in Switzerland, because they had a really good teacher. They had a tennis coach. His name was Roger Federer. He was teaching them tennis. He was fantastic. He was really, really good. And he was really expensive. But they had loads of money, so they were just paying him for coaching lessons. It was really, really cool. They were on television sometimes as well. Anyway, so they were playing tennis in Switzerland, and the king, meanwhile, was in his castle crying and saying, oh, look, send messengers out. Tell the princess I forgive her. I love her. Please, I want her back. And eventually, one of the messengers got back to the princess and said, Princess, your father is scared. He wants you well. He doesn't care about the prisoner anymore. He would like you to come back home. So the princess and the prisoner, they said goodbye to Roger Federer, and they got back on the horse and cart. They rode all the way back to the castle, and the king was so happy. He said, oh, I'm so pleased. I'm sorry I was so stupid, and I'm sorry because he didn't have a headache that day, so he was really happy. And he said, oh, I'm sorry. I really didn't mean to upset you, Mr. Prisoner. Please marry my daughter. I'll be the happiest man in the world. So the princess and the prisoner, they got married, and they were allowed to live in the castle happily ever after. And then they locked that prison door and they never put anyone in it again because they thought it was really horrible. And Roger Federer used to come over and teach them to play tennis actually in their castle because they had their own tennis court. It was right next to the swimming pool. So that was just the amazing and true story of the princess and the prisoner, because actually they had 3 babies as well. But I'll tell you about what happened with the babies next time or another time. Anyway, goodbye. I hope you enjoyed the story, because it's a true story about the Princess and Prisoner. Please leave a like if you liked it. Leave a dislike if you didn't like it. It's not a problem. If you subscribed, that's good. And if you haven't, please press the subscribe button. Beep, 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 beep. And apart from that, have a lovely evening, or have a lovely morning, have a lovely day. Sleep well wherever you are in the world. I hope you have a fantastic time. Bye-bye, Princess and the Prisoner. Wow!